Chapter 1051 rok. I'm helping.
Sure enough, 30 seconds later, one very annoyed old woman with a scarf over her head, covering her hair and her ears, stomped out and smacked him over the head with a wooden spoon. Then she placed her hands on her hips and glared at him. In my defense, she is the best in my group with food creation. Carl tried. And you didn't think to send someone to keep her in line? One experiment-obsessed Naga queen is not enough. They just hype each other up. Carl could see that, especially in the kitchen, when Remy was excited about experimenting with new foods. Anything that could be turned into a research project was enough to get Remy excited, and if it was both an experiment and edible, it was even better. After all, food was the introductory level of alchemy in Remy's mind. All the mixing and precise measurements, none of the requirements that the creator have magical aptitude. Carl patted the little mouse woman, who huffed and turned away. They'd better be helpful in the kitchen, with all the mess that they're making. She muttered as she walked away. Ask them to make you extra sweets, and to stock your pantry. High Priestess Lotus will help you out. Carl called after her. The beastkin laughed quietly as the angry chef returned to her work, then laughed harder at the sound of Happy squeaking after the door was closed. She could pretend to be angry all that she wanted, but her instincts got the better of her once she was alone with Lotus and a kitchen full of fresh vegetables. Well, now that we know we will be getting a well-stocked pantry for the next week, what would you like to drink? We have ale, mead, and wine. Or dwarven whiskey if you have deep pockets. The waitress asked. Ale is good. I'm sure that they'll have something special for dinner soon. Lotus loves to cook almost as much as she likes fluffy ears. The waitress shook her head in dismay. One day, I will meet a sane green dragon cleric. Carl shook his head. That's the problem. This is as sane as they get. The green dragons are just as excitable and curious as their clerics. So, while they can be rational, they're never going to not want to touch the fluffy thing. The waitress smiled gently and nodded. That makes sense. We tell our children to watch for them, like they're a terror, but I can't recall the last time that I heard of a green dragon cleric intentionally starting a fight. They get in plenty, but they never mean to start them. Thor relayed the situation to the others, who were happy to remain in the tiny world for the night instead of coming out to deal with whatever chaos Lotus and Remy had caused. Thor had explained fairly well that the spot Carl had found was not very welcoming, but it would be good enough for the evening, and then they could come out tomorrow to see the city if they wanted. However, his description didn't make it sound all that appealing, other than the food that was promised once Remy and Lotus were done experimenting. Really, this city wasn't all that grand. It was large and built on somewhat of a hill, so it wasn't too swampy, but the land around it was still very much waterlogged, and the buildings were all discreetly elevated by a meter, with a space underneath to allow flood water to pass when it rained. The terrain was the primary reason that there were no major cities between them and the western border as well. It simply wasn't desirable enough for tribes who had the resources to contend for territory elsewhere to stay. The waitress continued to bring drinks as Carl chatted with the locals about the situation in the area. There were no major incidents lately, which was a good start, but there had been quite a bit of rain, so the roads would be worse than usual between here and the temple. It wasn't open enough to travel by boat, but the Naga group would certainly want to make the last bit of the trip under their own power, as it seemed to be some sort of holy pilgrimage for them. Or at least for their shamans. In fact, it was almost suspiciously quiet in the town, with everything that was going on in the nation to their west. It was only a few hundred kilometers away that things were utter chaos, and the whole army spent all their time fighting monsters that had wandered out of the changing zones. But the tribes here didn't appear to have the same issue, and the problem certainly wasn't a concern this far east. Not only that, but the attacks by the Bomgan army didn't target this region, so they weren't even having problems with foreign spies or curses. It was almost as if Gabble itself were cursed with misfortune. Why did you go to Gabble? That land is dangerous. One of the beastkin asked. Carl shrugged. I was with a black dragon, and her goddess demanded that the excess monster population be kept in check. Gabble has had many issues with them in the past, so the death god decided it was time to start putting things back in balance. The locals at the tavern looked suitably impressed with that answer. Though many of them worked hard to build their power, It was mostly so that they would not be suppressed by more powerful forces in the city. It took a unique sort of personality to willingly go out into the wilderness and put your life on the line when you could grow your system stats with trade skills and a vigorous training regimen. Of course, that logic was why so many never reached more than mediocre levels of power, even with long lives. But it was safer, and it was better in nearly every mind to live a long and uneventful life than a short and brutal one aiming for the top. That thought, naturally, had never occurred to Carl. Chapter 1052. The City Never Sleeps. When Lotus came out with an entire cart full of freshly baked sweets, she was an instant hit with the visitors to the tavern. Even the old construction workers who were sitting in a corner, looking grimly at their mugs of ale, were smiling as she passed them a small plate with a selection of baked goods on it. Her enthusiasm for snacks was contagious, and even Carl had chosen to ignore the fact that she had a large mug of coffee on the tray for herself. If she got too hyper, he could just send her back to Ophelia. The sound of blades clashing and wood smashing from outside caught Carl's attention, and the waitress quickly moved to bar the door. "Is the area that bad?" Carl whispered to the man beside him. The werewolf shook his head. "Probably. We sit near the edge of the district, and the Naga get into it with the trolls on a fairly regular basis. The city guard doesn't care how much they break in their brawls, and they never make them pay for the damage. So we just get out of the way, or bar the door so that nothing happens to the building." The building itself was made of common field stone, oblong rocks patched together with mortar. If things actually got serious, Carl knew that it wouldn't take much to throw someone through the wall. But it wasn't likely that things would go that far in the city. "You look like you just had a strange thought," the werewolf noted. "I was just thinking that if they were serious about fighting, it wouldn't take much to throw someone through a non-magical fieldstone wall."
Carl replied quietly.
The werewolf laughed. "You're not wrong, but they're usually not trying to kill each other, just to assert dominance. A territory fight of sorts between the two most populous groups." A middle-aged catwoman smirked at Carl. "You say that as if you could also throw someone through the wall." Lotus giggled when she heard the comment, and sipped her coffee before patting the woman on the shoulder. "The Carl is a monster in disguise. Forget throwing them through the wall, he could probably throw them out of the city from here. Over the city wall." The woman laughed along with her, but Carl did a quick calculation. If he transformed, he was fairly sure that he could hurl an average-sized troll at least 200 meters. That was far enough to make it over the city wall. Of course, if they were an overlord or totem-rank troll, it would barely injure them, and they would heal before they stopped skidding through the mud. But they would be outside the city. Naga were much more difficult to throw. Remy transformed back to her Naga form and settled down on the bench beside Carl, while Lotus continued to make friends. They had time to kill, and she wasn't ready to go up to the room and pretend to sleep. But she had forgotten that this city had tens of thousands of Naga in it. None of them actually slept, they just rested when they didn't have things to do, conserving energy. So, the schedules of everything in the city were adapted to a population that was active at all hours of the day. The markets were always open, and the staff just changed shifts 4 times a day. The same was true for most of the shops and especially the taverns. One shift would finish drinking and go home, but another would arrive right after. And that was what the crowd did a few minutes later, once the fighting outside stopped. There were more customers waiting to come in when the waitress lifted the bar on the doors, but Carl noticed that while the wooden stalls of the vendors on the block were mostly smashed, the ones right in front of the tavern were intact, as if the fight had skipped the spot in front of their building. The waitress sighed as she saw the extent of the damage, then shrugged. Well, at least they spared a few this time, though they might just have not wanted to annoy the totem. She muttered as she welcomed the next group to their seats, along with 2 more staff members, who were quickly served a meal so they could get to work. That also meant a whole new batch of people for Lotus to meet and serve sweets to. The nature priestess was quickly becoming a hit with the patrons, and when they found out that she had completely stocked the pantry of the tavern with stew ingredients and good flour for bread, she became even more popular. Carl realized that would normally be considered very generous payment for simply getting to use the kitchen, especially when she was giving the patrons all the pastries, but that was the way of the dragon clerics. Anywhere that they stopped, they tended to leave behind food, and the better you treated them, the more food they would leave. It could almost be considered a devious tactic to build goodwill and recruit followers, but devious and Lotus didn't belong in the same sentence. It was just impossible to see her as anything but flaky and devoted to her principles. I should go back to work for the night. I need to make preparations before we reach the temple. Remy announced a few hours later, as a third group of patrons was beginning to replace the second. The waitress who had been on shift when they arrived was long gone, but the one on duty quickly brought them the key to a room and refused Carl's attempt to pay for his drinks. The priestess has provided more than enough. Just please take her with you. Someone taught her about cream liquors in coffee, and it's going to end badly. The waitress whispered. Lotus had mixed them in an ale mug, and there was no doubt that the waitress was absolutely correct. Lotus, time to go. Ophelia is ready for a nap. Carl called. 5 more minutes. We've got an idea for better egg tarts. Well, that was hard to argue with. Chapter 1053, Backlog of Work. Within half an hour, Lotus was deposited back in the tiny world, escorted by Remy, and Carl headed for the upstairs room. He brought out the haint and the epic guard for company, then took out an elven steel chestplate to do some runic work. Then he stared at it in confusion. This was clearly not armor, or at least not effective armor. Could it be for Ray to put over a leather base? The spider laughed as Carl stared at the thin and flexible plates of metal with ornately decorated breast forms. It's a decorative armor piece for succubi. It's meant to be worn in the bedroom, not the battlefield. Though, knowing succubi, that is kind of the same thing. Ray joked. Well, if that was the case, Carl knew just what sort of enchantments he should put on it. He got right to work planning runes for comfort, agility, stamina regeneration, mana regeneration, and damage reduction. It wasn't a hard combination to make, and normally, it would be the base for some sort of much more grand effect. But for this particular piece, enhancing all of those aspects to the totem rank was precisely what the wearer needed. They didn't need a combat skill, they would only occasionally need serious defensive enhancements, which could be placed on spell gems in accessories. When he was finished, the item hummed with power, and Carl put it back into his inventory, as the guild store was still out of range. They had come a fair distance east, which was closer to Drod, but not quite far enough to put them within range of the shop. With the first piece done, Carl moved on to the next item that Ashbringer had piled into the travel crate for him. It was a simple set of chain and plate pants, designed for a heavy defender. If it wasn't elven steel, the dwarves would love this. Though once Carl finished, they might not care about what the base material set was. The elven steel was much lighter than the human equivalent of the same name, as well as being worlds apart in durability. So, it could be comfortably worn all day, though it was a bulky design. Again, the runes were deceptively simple but powerful. It was just better to focus on the primary purpose of the item, and leave the accessories and weapon to add the specialty effects. Though, when Carl brought out the third piece and found a set of delicate steel boots with snowflake patterns on them, he thought some should have a suitable effect for their design. Using some runes from Bulwark, Carl granted the boots basic ice creation effects, then added runes for fire resistance to the standard defensive abilities. Those ones would definitely be worth putting up at the auction in Drod when it was time. Carl lay back on the bed while the haint stared curiously out the window. There were many things in the world that she had not seen yet, and though she had some memories inherited from Lifa, they were mostly on the instinctive genetic level, not detailed like Ray's knowledge of various species. The night passed quickly with very little going on outside other than the steady flow of workers going to and from their jobs. The haint was disappointed. The other times she had been brought out were to watch for threats. But today it looked like she was only here to see how boring large groups of monsters could be when they weren't crazed by the anomalies. But it was her duty to watch Carl as he meditated, and his progress was sure to make one of the others advance very soon. Her bet was on Kara, despite the badger's laziness. Hawk also had a skill at totem rank effectiveness now, but it wasn't quite the same as Kara's grasp of high-powered skills. Even when she was inactive as a weapon, the haint was still aware of what happened around her, and analyzing combat effectiveness was the specialty of the haints. But the living weapon was shocked when the first inklings of advancement did not come from the badger's space, but from Opal's. The butterfly's advancement was subtle, her adolescent body becoming more durable as the totemic blessing formed around it, and she slowly stopped leaking mana. She could still emit it at will to keep the energy in her surroundings balanced, but no longer was she uncontrollably leaking it with every move that she made. This was the point of natural survival for her species, where they could control themselves enough to function. Both the Haint and Carl watched in fascination as Opal began to redecorate her space, throwing a party for herself to celebrate her victory. You know, you could do that in the tiny world and invite everyone. Carl reminded her. Oh, that is a great idea. I can come out and visit with everyone for like 30, no, maybe 20 minutes. Carl tried not to laugh. Interacting with others in person really is that tiring, isn't it? Opal bobbed her wings in agreement. She would return to her space, but she could leave her illusion there, and it would fill in for her once her social battery was exhausted. The other beasts passed over small gifts for her, all tailored to either her nature as an illusionist or to something in her space. The thoughtfulness would have made Opal tear up if she had eyes. She was realizing that she had underestimated the importance of the affection of family, even though she had been observing it all this time. Now that she had opened up to being included in it, the feeling was quite warm. Even the notoriously unserious Kara and the food-obsessed Hawk had found her appropriate gifts for her advancement. Then Carl finished engraving an illusion element stone with the golem spell and placed it on the stage in the small practice amphitheater in Opal's space. It's beautiful. I can make better solid illusions for my plays, she gasped. I thought that you might appreciate that. I know that it's not actually an advantage in most of the shows, but now you can have crowd interaction when you want it. I remember that you were reading a book on fake illusionist shows, where they have audience volunteers.
Carl explained.
Opal flitted around her space in joy. She really did have the best family members. Chapter 1054. Totemic Opal. When everyone else woke up in the morning, there was a massive garden party in the open grass outside the guild house in the tiny world, and the Naga were already present, playing darts with moving targets. The game had been a last-minute addition by Opal, but it had been an instant hit. What are we celebrating? Dana asked when she saw the party decorations. Miss Opal made it to the totem rank last night, officially. It's a bit unusual to have her decorate her own party, but she's the best at it.
Carl explained.
That made sense to Dana. She was born as a master of the illusionary domain, and as long as nobody was actively trying to damage her illusions, the butterfly could create any scene that she desired instantly. The Naga had been shocked by the elaborate setup, but then Butterfly came out in person. They immediately recognized the slightly unstable aura that marked a recent upgrade. Oh, now I see why the fuss. A new totem is an important day for any clan, even one as powerful as yours. One of the Naga whispered to Remy. Remy nodded happily. More of us should make that point soon, as we all work together despite our different specialties. The goal is to have over half the group be totem ranked within the month. The Naga chuckled at her enthusiasm, then realized that she was completely serious. Remy's confidence that they would actually make it to totem rank was confusing, but infectious. The Naga was excited to have an alliance with a totem-ranked queen, as it would lead to great respect for his people among the surrounding tribes. What he hadn't realized yet was that Remy had no intentions of staying with their clan after she visited the temple. With Opal present, the party could get properly started, and Lotus started bringing out trays of snacks, while Carl did his best to mimic Opal's illusionary abilities to set off fireworks in the sky of the tiny world. But true to her expectations, after saying hello to everyone, receiving their congratulations and floating around for a bit, she was ready to head back to her space. But Kara had a plan. Sister, I set up an obstacle course. Come race me, the Chaos Badger insisted. The course was a set of hoops on sticks planted around the garden at various angles and heights, but for smaller flying species, they were an excellent obstacle course. There is no set order, you just have to pass through them all, Kara insisted, then frowned as she saw that Ray was going around the garden, turning the hoops so that they faced different directions. That would completely change the most efficient route around the course. Ray waved her human form's hands over her head to get their attention. Line up side by side. Ready? Go! The two smallest flyers of the group dashed out around the garden, and Kara realized that even knowing the course in advance wouldn't save her. Sister Opal was incredibly fast, and her agility was on a whole other level. Kara weighed close to 50 kilos, and even with her skill to assist her flying, she still took some time to turn. While Opal was technically larger in wingspan, she weighed closer to 5 kilos, and most of that was her body, as her wings were paper-thin without the need for bone structure. Kara was only a third of the way through the course when Opal finished and the crowd burst into applause. Naksha chuckled. We have a similar course at the Dragon God's Temple in my hometown, and there is no way that any of us could beat a butterfly through an obstacle course. They look slow, the way that they like to float around, but they're really not. Opal ran away only 3 runs through the obstacle course later, ready to rest in her space and sleep to plan her next epic play. None of the Naga were shocked by that. The glass-wing illusionary butterfly was reclusive by nature and masters of invisibility. The fact that this one had appeared around strangers was already a great show of trust. But it was also almost time for the auction to start. I will stay here with the clan. I would like to know more about the temple. You can take the Dana mage as your +1. Remy insisted. Carl held out his arm for Dana, then returned to the room, where the Haint and the Epic Guard were still on duty, making sure nobody messed with their room. Dana transformed into fox form and followed Carl out. It should be less conspicuous than showing up in human form in the Beastkin Tavern. But she had forgotten about the side effects of fox charm, and the room fell silent when they walked into the tavern. Everyone seemed mesmerized and afraid to speak until the waitress on duty curtsied and greeted them. Mr. Carl, Lady Dana, were you staying for breakfast? She asked, not sure where this lovely lady had come from. Had Carl been hiding her somewhere? Keeping her for himself? That was a shame. Such beauty should be revealed to the world. Dana's fluffy ears flicked in amusement at the odd voice of the waitress. No, thank you. We're off to the auction. Carl listed an item, and we received an invitation. She explained, then tried not to frown as all the men in the room sighed the moment she stopped speaking. This effect is ridiculously strong on Beastkin. She complained with a system message. Carl shrugged and winked at one of the Beastkin as he led her toward the door, accompanied by the Haint and Epic Guard. Thank you for your hospitality. We may be back this evening after the auction, if we don't head directly to the temple. The waitress smiled and nodded repeatedly, bobbing her head. I look forward to seeing you both again. Carl stepped outside and heard the waitress whisper to one of the patrons. I should have known. How could a man like that not already have a wife? But did you see her? Oingje. He must be fighting off the suitors everywhere they go. Chapter 1055. Attracting attention. Dana couldn't help but curse Tion's innocent eagerness to help as they walked down the streets, and heads turned to watch her pass. She wasn't even wearing anything fancy, just her usual silk robes and the decorative armor that Ray had made for her. She had been hoping that it would attract less attention than dressing up, as Carl was in a suit. But it didn't seem to help. When they got to the auction house, the 2 lizardfolk guards looked extra excited, and then enraged when Carl handed them his token and announced he was here with his +1. Your guards can wait in the back standing area with the other servants. One of them growled, then ushered them through. That's not suspicious at all. Dana whispered as they entered. Yeah, something is off. I suspect we've got about 10 minutes before someone does something stupid. Carl agreed. He extended his senses out and found that there were 2 mythic ranked guests inside the auction house already, and dozens of totems. If things went bad, he would toss Dana in the tiny world at the first sign of trouble. They took their seats, and the totem-ranked beastkin next to Carl nodded politely. Were you auctioning an evening with your courtesan today? He asked quietly. Carl shook his head. I put a master-crafted overlord-ranked weapon up for auction. The beastkin smiled and nodded. That could be even more interesting, though I'm sure some will be disappointed that you flexed on them. Dana looked at him curiously. Flexed on them? The man nodded. Foxkin are known to be the world's greatest lovers other than succubi, with their illusion and charm magic. For that reason, they live like pampered princesses, and there are virtually no female foxes among the commoners. They're all nobility or taken in as ranking servants to the royal family, which might as well be nobility. So, it's rare to see one in public at all. So, showing up at an auction with one on your arm might as well be calling all the other attendees peasants.
Dana frowned.
But you don't seem upset. The beastkin smirked. I am the younger son of the regional governor. Far enough up the ladder that even without a title, I still have a fox and a succubus among my courtesans. Dana thought about his words while Carl thought about his past interactions. He had met many male foxes but few females. But the thing with keeping fox girls as courtesans was definitely a local thing. The demons weren't as enamored with them and knew them more for their trickery. A transformed silver dragon seated in front of them turned around with an expression that reminded him of the blue dragons when they were exposed to new information. Fox magic is powerful, but here in Nulgat it is stronger than usual because our local foxkin are descended from the divine fox lineages. Unlike the common fox beastkin, their power is 100-fold stronger. If I had to guess, I would say that the young lady is from the Stonefur divine fox lineage. She has the feeling of their magic. Tell me, can you use their healing magic? Dana smiled back at the dragon, who served the dragon god of magic, and shook her head.
Unfortunately no.
I didn't get healing magic, only a small dose of fox charm and a battle mage type class. That somehow made the dragon even more excited, and he gave the man on Dana's side a pleading look. Fine, I will switch with you, but only because I don't want to be caught in the middle. The troll muttered, completely uninterested in talks of foxes or magical spells. At least her charm didn't overly affect everyone, Dana decided. It was mostly just the beastkin that it affected too much, and some of the lizard folk like the guards at the door. The silver dragon lowered his voice, now that they were sitting side by side. If you're trying to find the answers, I think you are. It's beasts and humans. Lizard folk are technically beastkin, though they get their own species name. The other species will find you charming, but not nearly as strongly. Dana nodded in relief, but the dragon was curious. How did you make it this far without learning the extent of your powers? He asked. It's a recent development. I used an experimental potion to advance to overlord rank, and it had divine fox fur in it. The silver dragon was enthralled now. New magic was as exciting to them as new knowledge was to the blue dragons. So, you were not a fox before? He asked. Dana shook her head. Human. The dragon looked startled. Now that is shocking, but that might be because I'm originally from Copy, and the humans there are almost all slaves or menial workers. Letting them grow in power is unusual.
Dana frowned.
They would have to add that place to the list of places to avoid. Though if she remembered right, Copy was mostly dragons and dragonkin with a few lesser reptile species. The majority of the group would probably be fine there. We're from Drod. The demons are much less particular, she offered. The dragon nodded in understanding. Yes, demons and humans have an odd relationship. They pretend to despise each other, but in practice they live together without any real issues, as the demons only respect strength and don't try to stop others from growing their power. The auctioneer took the stage and took out a small crystal orb. She cast a spell, and the orb glowed softly, amplifying noise from its immediate vicinity. Welcome, dear guests, to the Kathar auction. Today we will be starting off with a bang. We have procured a rare item for you all to bid on. An epic-grade overlord-ranked blade made of pure elven steel. The auction house filled with quiet chatter. That was impressive but not shocking. Then she continued, and the blade has been enchanted by a rune master, granting a wide variety of enhancements, far beyond the standard of any regular blade. Chapter 1056. Auction Bidding. Now the auction house was getting excited, and they hadn't even seen the blade yet. It wasn't anything overkill in Carl's mind, just sharpness and skill damage. But the sharpness skill did ignore the majority of the target's armor. A magical sign above the auctioneer displayed a set of stats about the weapon, including the name of the creator, which was listed as both Carl and Ashbringer of the Darklight Host Guild. A light shone on Carl, who waved at the auctioneer, and the whole auction house turned to look at him, while Dana resisted the urge to facepalm. They had been doing so well with trying to avoid notice after realizing that her appearance had an outsized effect on the locals. Carl turned to look at one of the mythic rank guests, whose attention he could feel. The feeling was creepy, and he wondered if his estimate of 10 minutes might have been far too long before something happened. This should be fun. He's a champion from the Sholaha arenas, the ones that they run for priority rights to the powerful dungeons that they have. I wonder if he's going to try to make a move, the silver dragon whispered to Dana, with the same excited tone that Kara used when she was about to cause chaos. The beastkin beside Carl snorted in amusement. It says right on the sign that he's the actual runemaster. You'd have to be crazy to offend him here and risk having yourself blacklisted from his future sales. The auctioneer turned off the light on Carl and began speaking again. We will start the bidding at 5,000 golden gat. Carl determined that those were the larger local gold coins, and the bidding was quickly going up, but the myth who was giving Carl the strange feeling wasn't bidding at all. Perhaps he simply wasn't interested in an overlord-ranked weapon. The bidding moved quickly past 20,000 coins, then 50, before finally selling for 85,000 coins. That was more than enough to keep Carl happy. Transfer notice. Kathar Auction Guild wishes to transfer 80,750 gold coins. That should be the full payment minus the 5% auction house fee. Transfer accepted. The auctioneer was about to move on when a large winged form leapt from the upper balconies. The mythic rank champion had made his move. He took the voice amplification orb from the auctioneer. The Sholaha Dominators Guild challenges the Darklight Host. We claim the right of ownership over the members Carl, Ashbringer, and Dana. He declared. Guild War Challenge accept?
/N.
Carl got to his feet, and the spotlight shone on him as he helped Dana to her feet and moved her through the entrance to the tiny world. The Darklight Host accepts your declaration of war. Do you wish to hold an open war, or settle this by a challenge of champions? Carl asked, raising his voice so the whole auction could hear him. Then he equipped his armor, letting everyone see the double golden borders of 2 successful over-rank challenges. In her space, Ray smirked. Oh, I hope that he picks open war. Kara and Matilda are ready to explode with excitement. The dragonkin smirked at Carl and made a come-and-get-it type gesture. We will settle this by champions. Auctioneer, clear the arena. The silver dragon turned to look at Carl. I hope that you know what you're doing.
Carl winked.
Come and watch, you'll laugh until your sides hurt. But Supreme Lady Matilda was hoping for a real war. The dragon went pale as he realized just what the mythic ranked warrior had done. If the Supreme Lady decided not to wait for the duel to be finished, or that she didn't want Carl to be the champion for the fight, she could declare herself the champion, and they would lose by default as the challenging guild didn't have anyone to fight her. Then, they would have to pay reparations equal to the demand that they had made. 2 overlords and 1 totem-ranked member. Whether the Darklight Host took equal payment for them, or killed them didn't matter to the system. The auctioneer opened a portal, and a powerful mythic ranked mage stepped through with an annoyed look on his face. Who is causing trouble here? He demanded. The dragonkin bowed slightly to him. Your Majesty, my apologies. It's a simple guild matter. We will leave to settle it and the auction can continue. The new arrival looked between them, then laughed. Oh, I think not. The auction is on hold. We will move to the arena now to watch this battle. That confused the guild master. Why would the king of Nulgat care about a guild duel, even if it was at this level? What he didn't know was that all the myths who could use portals had gathered when Carl had advanced, and as he shared a border with Gabble, he had come to see what was going on as well. The advancement of some totem 2 nations over hadn't concerned the warrior, so he had no idea that Carl was no average craftsman. In the guild house in Drod City, Ashbringer got the message that someone had claimed ownership of him as their guild member, a forced guild contract, and the terms were unlikely to be favorable. But the system said that it was being settled by Duel by Carl, so he relaxed a little. There was nothing that he could do from here to stop it, and not much that he could do to help on such short notice. In contrast, Mick was in a full-blown panic. If they lost Carl and Ashbringer, what would the guild branch do? They only had apprentices here, and they would lose most of their ability to fill the higher-level orders that had built their reputation. But more importantly, if Carl were forced to leave, would the others who traveled with him stay? If not, the Drod branch of the Darklight host would quickly become a laughingstock here in Drod, with a few royal rank crafters as their strongest members. Chapter 1057. Duel in Nulgat. The king of Nulgat cleared his throat and opened another portal. Champions, please follow me through the portal, so we can discuss the terms of the challenge. Everyone else, you have 10 minutes to reach the arena before the battle begins. Carl jumped over the crowd to land on the stage, using swims through air to avoid a hard landing. The spectators began to talk excitedly about his casual acceptance and his physical control. But the king didn't wait, and the two followed him through to a room that overlooked a sand floor arena. What the hell were you thinking? A mythic ranked duel here of all places? Here. Forget the fact that the word is already spreading about you challenging someone in Nulgat. You did it in the middle of nowhere. The king raged. And you? Why did you accept instead of negotiating?
Karl shrugged.
He demanded ownership of guild members, including myself. Nothing about his terms was acceptable for negotiation. You should feel blessed that I didn't demand a full-scale guild war. The champion snorted in amusement, and the king growled at him. Jerome, do you have no sense left in your brain? The Darklight host has a supreme-ranked Chaos Dragon among their members. If they refuse to accept a duel, there might not be a nation left for you to go home to, even if you won the fight. The king informed him. Jerome, the Dragonkin warrior who had started this whole mess, stared at the king in confusion. The only supreme-ranked dragon on the entire planet is Supreme Lady Matilda. Yes, you just challenged her guild to a guild war. Carl's smirk nearly set off the warrior, and the king of Nulgat sighed. Do you have to keep annoying him? He asked. Keep annoying him? I fully intend to kill him.
Karl corrected.
A third ring would look good on his tabard. I can see that this won't be solved peacefully. I will have the Royal Council reinforce the barriers on the arena. Take your positions, and I will signal the start of the battle when the barriers are ready. Carl and Jerome both jumped down onto the sand to wait while the arena filled. Already, portals were opening, and mythic-ranked fighters in well-worn armor were filling the best seats. These must be either friends or competitors of Jerome, though none of them were his guild members. I hope that you're ready to start crafting. I don't give days off for failed challengers. Jerome taunted. You know, I always wanted a mythic dungeon of my very own. How much time is left on your claim?
Karl replied.
The people in the stands burst into laughter. The annual contest had just ended. He had it for over 300 more days. At 20% tax on what was taken out, Carl would be filthy rich by the end of the year if he could actually win the fight. But if he could, then he could likely claim a totem-ranked dungeon in next year's challenge anyhow. Not that any of them expected him to actually win this fight. The visiting mages joined the Royal Council in reinforcing the barriers, trapping the two contestants inside. Hey, what's the rule on duels? Ray asked. She had never properly seen one done in an arena like this before, and wasn't entirely clear on whether she got to come out and play. Carl checked the system interface. No bonded partners or outside assistants. Only the two champions and effects created by their abilities are allowed in the arena. Carl read. Clearly, someone had tried to sign a contract to have a more powerful ally come to them in a challenge before, and the system had turned it into a disadvantage to classes like Carl's. You should leave your weapons in storage and just beat his face. Kara offered. Carl did have Brutal Pugilist, which was far more effective in dragon form. 15% unarmed damage per rank. Totem was the 8th rank, so that was 120% in total. I hear what you're thinking. Definitely punch him in the face.
Kara laughed.
The king's voice boomed through the arena. Combatants, finish your preparations. The arena has been sealed, and we have confirmed neither party is suffering from negative status effects. Carl smiled and called the Haint, the epic guard, the Lamia duo, and a pair of dire bear golems, then activated Avatar to transform into the massive form of a world dragon. Jerome smirked. It was all posturing. He was mythic, with 90% reduced damage from all the totem rank trash. He could just ignore the extras, and it would be impossible to miss a dragon that size with any skill he used. But the audience was beginning to place wagers with renewed enthusiasm. He might still be outclassed, but this Darklight host champion had talents far beyond simply crafting. Plus, he had no fear. That alone put him far above most under-ranked champions. The hesitation and instinctive need to protect their lives actually cost most of them their fights. Inside the tiny world, Opal was recreating the arena scene outside, while Remy did the narration with much more colorful interpretations than what the king had given to the live audience. "Begin," the king declared, resigned to the waste of this duel. No matter who won, it would be an overall loss for everyone else. Jerome leapt forward, while Carl swatted at him with a massive claw. Dragon claws met mithril as the strikes clashed, while the two opposing skills exploded outward in a burst of energy that shook the barrier over the arena. Jerome roared as he cast an additional layer of physical buffs on himself, but Carl wasn't concerned. Physically, he was still the far stronger of the two. The issue was going to be the level of power output. His arm still ached from that strike, and it hadn't even split the scales. Nullify. Yes, that was better. Jerome wouldn't have time to fully restore his buffs. Carl didn't wait for his opponent to finish preparing for another attack and struck again, using Void Blast to rain explosions on the warrior from a distance. Then he followed it up with Ghost Fire, used like a dragon breath attack intending to confuse the enemy. Jerome flung himself to the wall as the flames licked out. Dragon fire was evil stuff, and if Carl set him on fire, he would have to waste precious seconds putting himself out instead of dealing with this overconfident crafter. Pushing off the wall, he hurled himself back into combat, but the Haint shoulder checked him and aimed her long claws directly between his legs. Kara cheered as the claws struck home, but the warrior's defenses held, and he was thrown off course with a painful shriek of claws on metal. When he landed, the Lamia bombarded him with ranged blade attacks and the bears charged, keeping him away from Carl, who was still unloading constant void blasts at him. "You damnable coward! I am going to rip you apart, then resurrect you and do it again." Carl gave him a huge draconic smile and snapped his fingers, using Tion's earth manipulation skill to create a spike of earth, aimed upward from the floor. Jerome was forced to roll away again, and the crowd burst into laughter. If Carl lost this fight, the warrior was definitely going to torture him to death. Repeatedly. Chapter 1058. Enraged Myth. Jerome hurled a barrage of slash attacks at the summons, but Carl created stone barriers in front of them that stopped the skills, even though the barriers themselves shattered on contact. So, the warrior charged into close combat, quickly slashing both golems to death before the Haint grabbed him from behind, and the Lamia stabbed him with all four blades, sending their skills directly into his body. Carl's massive paw smashed down on Jerome's head, tearing open his face, and ripping the chest plate of his armor off with pure brute force. The three long claw marks, from his forehead to his navel, gushed blood as hemotoxic strikes passively prevented healing from physical injuries. Jerome burst with power, throwing the Haint back and destroying the Lamia. "It's just you and me again," he growled, looking pleased with himself. Carl swung at him again, and Jerome erected a shield in front of himself. But at the last second, Carl stopped his paw and used it as the focus to hurl purgatory flames at the warrior, engulfing him in flames that used every bit of mana in Carl's body. Mana that he was quickly recovering from the mana crystals in the tiny world, and from the spaces of the beasts. Jerome staggered back, scorched and dropping ash from his body with every step. He coughed, and smoke burst from his lips, even as blood spattered the ground in front of him. Carl swatted him with one hand, hurling him against the barrier and leaving 3 more long claw marks across his chest. The warrior fell to the ground, barely conscious. He struggled feebly and tried to blast the massive foot off him as Carl repeatedly blasted his scorched body with ghost fire. Blood loss was making it hard to focus, and Jerome couldn't understand why his heroic regeneration skill hadn't fixed his body yet. It was repairing the burn damage faster than Carl was inflicting it, but the claw wounds weren't closing, and his body only held so much blood, even with regeneration skills in effect. Jerome activated Heroic Intervention, an emergency skill that boosted his power and skills for a short time, then Rip and Tear, an area attack version of Rend. Golden scales flew as the skill tore into Carl's body, and the warrior forced his foot up, pushing Carl onto his hind legs and forcing him to retreat. Carl called back the Lamia and the golems as he retreated. The extra bodies bought him a few seconds for Void Body to begin closing the wounds, but he wasn't the only one with abilities to slow healing. Void Body was working, but at less than half of its usual speed. The two combatants growled at each other, oblivious to the roar of the crowd outside the barriers. They had been expecting a fight, but not like this. This was not a duel. This was a grudge match, and the two powerful combatants were tearing each other to shreds. Jerome's body was starting to show actual flesh again, but Carl's mana had almost recovered. The mana storage of the tiny world was low, so he wouldn't be able to use the same technique more than one more time. But one more Purgatory Flame strike would be more than enough to finish off the warrior. Jerome frantically hurled attacks at Carl, trying to finish him off before the blood loss got to him. But Carl met the strikes with his claws, coated in multiple layers of barriers, and totem-ranked stone. With the summons back in action, it was only a matter of time now, and already the warrior was slowing, his mind becoming fuzzy. He repeatedly tried to go for potions, but before he could get them to his mouth, the uncanny accuracy of the Lamia shattered the bottles, dumping the healing potions in the sand. If he hadn't had the mythic-ranked blessing, those massive gaping claw wounds would have bled him out in a matter of seconds. But as the minutes drew on and the stalemate continued, he was still holding strong. The sand of the arena was entirely soaked in gold and black blood from the dragon and dragonkin, as well as scales and ash from scorched flesh. But still Carl couldn't get the advantage. "We're getting low on mana," Tian warned. Their spaces were at a third of capacity and holding steady, but they wouldn't be able to make much of a final push if Jerome had more skills hidden. Then the warrior seemed to deflate and simply collapsed. No attempt to stop himself, Jerome simply fell face down as Heroic Intervention ended and the last of the energy left his body. "This duel is over. Winner, Carl of the Darklight host," the king announced before the dust of the impact had even settled. It wasn't hard to see what his intention was. In a duel between a totem and a myth, he was not going to allow a last-minute strike that would do permanent damage or prevent the recovery of the defeated opponent. He had also recognized the Soul Link skill of the Haint, and knew that Jerome's soul was heavily damaged at this point. It would take him months to recover without specialist treatment from the Dragon Temples, and if he let Carl finish him off, it would prove nearly impossible to recover enough of his soul energy to resurrect him. And that would touch off an actual war among the mythic dungeon guilds. Carl patted the Haint on the head and let her return to storage, while he dismissed the rest of the summons so the king knew that he wasn't going to fight over the decision. With the battle over, Carl transformed back to cat demon form, and into his armor, which now had a third golden ring on the guild tabard. But this one was much more ornate. Not a simple line around the tabard, it was an interwoven knot design all the way around, and had a dragon skull pattern at the bottom where the tabard came to a point. The barrier came down, and a mythic-ranked cleric from the Sholaha Dominators Guild came to rescue his guild master. He winced as he saw the extent of the damage, but the Hemotoxic Strike skill only affected non-magical healing, and he was a mythic-ranked cleric of the White Dragon. Jerome was carried out of the arena by a mythic-ranked mage, and Carl turned his attention to the cleric. "High Priest, welcome." The man looked startled that Carl was greeting him courteously. They had no idea what had touched off the war, as Jerome hadn't elaborated in the message that said he was going to claim a group of powerful crafters for the guild. "War Champion, congratulations on your victory. Tell me, what was the agreed prize?" "The guild master didn't inform us in advance. A totem-ranked rune master and 2 overlords. A grandmaster demonic smith and a divine fox kin woman." Carl informed him in a dry tone, attempting to convey his anger without actually snapping at the cleric. "And your counter?" the cleric asked, knowing that had to be what Jerome wanted, as they didn't have any such members. "The whole proceeds of his current dungeon claim." The cleric blanched and then cursed repeatedly in a language that the system didn't translate. "Is there a chance that could be negotiated?" he asked hopefully. "Everything in life can be negotiated, for the right price." Chapter 1059, Negotiated Losses. The cleric sighed in relief and gestured to the exit of the arena. "Perhaps we could do this in private?" From the stands, there was a round of booing. "Hey! No taking this to a back room to pressure him. We're enjoying the show," someone shouted. A number of the other spectators laughed at the interaction. Of course, they wouldn't negotiate terms in public. Bill just wanted more of a show. But the battle between the World Dragon Avatar and the Battle Master with a whole rank between them had been an epic that would be told for ages. Carl hadn't noticed, but even with Void Body working, he still had countless slowly fading scars, both small and large, visible to everyone on his face and arms. It was only the insane amount of damage reduction that he had with the extra 20% from his new class, plus the limited invulnerability from Void Body that ignored the first portion of damage that actually made it through, which had given him the ability to stand against Jerome's attacks. None of the others were confident that they could take such a beating and still keep fighting. The cleric led Carl to a sitting room that looked like a staff break room, and then flopped down on a sofa. "Give me a moment to come up with something. I know you're not obligated to, but I think that I can make it worth your time without causing a riot among the guild members."
Karl shrugged.
It took 5 mythic ranked members to clear the dungeon in question, so it wasn't like he could do anything with it on his own, even though there was free access as well as the tax on those who the guild allowed to enter. A few seconds later, the door opened and 2 more people entered. One wearing the logo of the Kingdom of Nulgat, and a mythic ranked mage whose pointed ears made Carl think she might be an elf or some similar sort of fey species. "What have you come up with? No offense, but we've talked to the guild master, and nobody among the juniors is particularly eager to sign a servitude contract with the Chaos Dragon." "Have you seen what she does to the vampire?" Carl cleared his throat, and the woman jumped. "Sorry, I forgot you were going to be here. I'm sure she's a very nice person, but making a totem-ranked vampire council member where... Never mind. I can't bring myself to say that in public."
Karl laughed.
He would ask Kara about it later. Supreme Lady Matilda was actually quite fond of Tiffany, but it wouldn't surprise Carl if she treated the vampire like a living doll. "It's not that bad. Matilda has been making her wear the same dress that Ray has Mick wear to work, only with a shorter skirt."
Kara explained.
"So, a black and white frilly Lolita dress? That didn't sound so bad. But who knew what else Matilda had done to it? Though for someone of Tiffany's stature and age, it would be much more embarrassing than it was for a young shop clerk." The cleric leaned forward and took out a sheet of paper to write out a list of something, while Carl and the mage waited. The elf girl turned to Carl and tilted her head. "You're an interesting one, but I don't see why the guild master went so far trying to recruit you." Carl shrugged. "It might be because I'm a rune master, or it could just be that his little head was doing all the thinking. The second person he demanded was my wife, while the other was our guild's grandmaster demonic blacksmith." The elf rolled her eyes. "I wish I could say for certain that you were wrong, but a rune master at the totem rank is an insanely valuable guild asset." "Wait, pretend that I didn't say that." The cleric winced, then sighed. Praising the man who was about to determine if their offer was equal to what had been demanded of his guild was not helping their case when he was part of the deal. But come to think of it, how did you value a war champion with multiple victories? That thought gave him a renewed headache. The tax from the dungeon was the primary source of income for their guild, which had no crafting division. It was primarily assembled around a team of mythic-ranked adventurers and their lackeys. Once they removed that source of income, the guild would fall apart, and at this point there were over 200 people relying on that income, as well as the income from the other dungeons that they visited as a guild. The guild also owned a few businesses, but they weren't profitable yet, and building them would take some time. There had to be something that he could offer the war champion. Drod was at a significantly lower power level than the dungeon region around Lake Naraletum. What if he offered him knowledge? That should offset some of their loss, but it wouldn't be nearly enough to cover the debt unless he could come up with something incredibly rare. Thor's words were amused as he contacted Carl. The dragon gods think that it's funny that you're making him sweat. All three clerics say so. Carl tried not to laugh, as that would just confuse the two mythic guild members in front of him. Finally, the cleric sighed and began striking out ideas on his page. The elf went over and started crossing out other ideas until they were staring at a sheet with every idea crossed out. It looks like you're having some issues, Carl noted. Almost there. Just a few more minutes if you're not in a hurry. We can request that someone brings food while you wait. The elven mage offered. Carl waved off her concern and reached into Remy's space to grab an entire cake that her and Lotus had made at the inn. I have cake. Take all the time that you need. The elf simply stared at him in confusion for a few seconds as Carl cut and plated slices for everyone after creating plates and cutlery with earth magic. We're missing something. I can sense it in his aura. His mana is too calm, even for someone meditating. He's enjoying watching us struggle. She whispered to the cleric, who just rolled his eyes at her. Of course, he had all the advantages here, and there was a good chance that even 2-on-1 they couldn't take him. So, not only did he have the system on his side as the winner of the challenge, he was the more powerful party all by himself. Chapter 1060 Treasure Works 2. Carl watched them struggle for a few more minutes, then decided to relent and give them a few hints. Perhaps you could combine payment methods? Honestly, I'm not interested in taking unwilling guild members. They're just more trouble than they're worth, even if I use compulsion on them. But we do appreciate treasures and rare skills, he suggested. The cleric gave him a thin smile. Perhaps we can work something then. The guild has 2 treasures, and we can offer you payment on top to make up the difference. He offered.
Carl nodded.
If they're suitable, I don't see why not. The elf looked pained, but nodded in acceptance, and the cleric took the items out of the guild storage. The first was a mythic-ranked bracelet, and at first it didn't look all that special. But when Carl actually looked at with the system interface, that changed immediately. Eternity's Blessing Artifact Grade. Mythic rank. Equips in guild inventory. Activates the guild skill Eternity, granting guild members the physical stats expected to be present at the peak of their life, at their current rank. So that was how the guild skill function worked. The bracelet wasn't something that a person wore, the item was equipped for the guild. For some of them, this would be negligible. Most of the ladies were close to peak physical form by age right now, but Naksha would get much more powerful with age, even within the overlord rank. It would also help Tion if it applied to him. While Carl inspected the first item, the elf put the second item reluctantly on the low table between them. Amulet of Destruction Immortal Rank. Epic Grade. Increases the effect of 1 spell per minute by 1 rank in the mortal ranks, or 1 subrank for immortals. Carl couldn't hide his joy as he saw the item. Activating Avatar at the mythic rank would be absolutely devastating, and it was incredibly unlikely that it would be dispelled within a minute. But they were balancing items against 3 lives, including his own. At least they were taking it seriously. The elfin cleric shared a look, then nodded in response to whatever message they had sent each other. We can also offer you the full proceeds of 1 trip through the dungeon every week for the remainder of the year that we hold the rights. That's normally 1 epic grade totem ranked item per week, plus the assorted lower grade items. The cleric offered. Carl considered the options, including any and all crafting materials and trash drops that come from the dungeon. As a crafting guild, the Darklight host also has need of the raw materials. The cleric sighed in relief. That was very reasonable. All right, what is the best way to keep in contact? As neither of us has branch offices in the same city, Carl considered the options, then took out a piece of overlord-ranked stone from the dwarves. You can send me a message, but I will make you a recall stone, so you can just send someone to drop the items off at our guild shop in Drod. The cleric laughed, and the elf looked embarrassed. You don't know the spell, do you?
Carl realized.
Both shook their head, but Carl only shrugged. Open a portal to a safe spot outside your guild house, and I will put not only the spell but both locations on the stone, so your runner can go back and forth. He explained. That intrigued the elf, and she opened the portal to the courtyard of their guild house in Xylaz. Carl stuck his head through, looked around and nodded, certain that he could find that spot again and locate it with the recall spell. The pair of mythic adventurers sat quietly for half an hour as Carl carved an egg-shaped relic. He wasn't much of a sculptor, but with Tion's earth manipulation, he could make an egg easily enough. Though he realized when he was nearly done that he didn't actually need the stone from the dwarves, he could have just made one that would hold totem-ranked runes. The Overlord-ranked mana jade was pretty, though. There you go. It will bring you right outside our gates, beside the guard post, so if you send someone powerful through the portal, it won't alarm Lord Drod about your intentions. Our guild house is right next to the city gates, you see. Carl opened a portal to the location in question, and the guard on duty waved at him. Good morning. Just checking in to make sure everything is fine. He explained. The guard gave him a thumbs-up gesture. All good. Is your guild challenge settled already?
Karl nodded.
All done. We will have ongoing visitors with restitution payments, though. I don't know who they will send, but they will appear right here. The guard nodded. It wasn't outside the wall as city rules demanded, but it wasn't far. Carl closed the portal and the pair smiled at him. You really do get along well with the city guards, don't you? We've got a nature priestess who excels in fertility charms, a healing pulse area effect on the whole yard, and a smoking bench on the other side of the wall, so they can take a break out of sight. The elf giggled softly. The Darklight host really had made themselves popular with the demons, especially the city guards and the commoners, who were more likely to need a healer but not have coin for a specialist. The cleric got to his feet. If that settles everything, I will lead a group through the dungeon to prepare the first week's payment. With so many of our competitors here, I can't afford to wait too long to announce the terms and prove that we're paying. The dungeon region is highly competitive, and we don't need anyone slandering us more than they surely already are after a challenge loss. Carl patted him on the shoulder. Best of luck. Let me know if things fall apart for the guild, and I may be able to work something out with you. They had red, green, and black dragon clerics, but no white so far. With a bit of prep work and that new amulet, he could definitely help out and reap the bonuses that the system was sure to give him. Chapter 1061. Supply Proposition. The mage and cleric walked back into the arena, while Carl put the new items in his inventory. He didn't bond the amulet of destruction yet, though he couldn't see himself giving away something so valuable. It would surely be useful to the others as well, but only one person could bond and use the bracelet. So it made sense for the strongest to use it. The epic guard was already excited about it. She would love to be mythic rank. But the stronger you were, the scarier that item got. Not much in the world would be able to stand up to an immortal rank skill, or damage an immortal rank defensive ability. If they were given time to prepare for a battle, the amulet would allow them to stack up an impenetrable fortress. Well, in theory, Carl knew that there was a chance that when you chose another spell to buff, the other one would return to normal strength. That seemed like the most likely outcome. The system seemed to think it was funny to thwart the best plans. Now that the negotiations were over, the guests were beginning to go back to the auction, but Carl had no intentions of returning after the chaos that their presence had caused the first time. So, instead of continuing the day as planned, he walked out into the arena, where he was immediately surrounded by the more powerful spectators congratulating him on his victory, and their assistants. Most had prepared a small token for him, as congratulations on making a third over rank victory, and for a victory against a myth. That was an incredibly rare occurrence, as you had to deal 10 times the damage that your opponent did just to make it an even fight. Or some combination of that and damage reduction as Carl had. Champion Carl, do you have a moment to chat? I believe that we might have a proposal that you would be interested in. A mythic ranked mage asked, pushing through the crowd. Carl's first thought was that he was a beastkin of some sort due to his size, but like Professor Tank, he seemed to be simply a mountain of a man. You know that mage specializes in casting fist.
Cara giggled.
He certainly looked like the way that he was glaring at others. Mages lack physical skills, so he built his own. Thor noted, pleased with the man's ingenuity. He had compensated for his weakness. What sort of offer? Carl asked curiously. My group controls both a mythic and a totem-ranked dungeon. We would like to discuss a guild alliance for our people to work together. Carl smiled and nodded. I believe that could work well for us. As a guild primarily of crafters, we are always short on raw materials, and we are lower in number than most adventuring guilds. The massive mage smiled, and a few other guild leaders pushed forward to join him. These are the leaders of our other allied guilds. Might we ask, who is the guild leader of the Darklight host? The mage asked.
Karl chuckled.
Supreme Lady Matilda is our ranking member, but I am the head of the Drod branch of the guild, as she doesn't often concern herself with other regions outside her own territory. The others all made protective gestures in front of themselves, and Carl shrugged. It's fine to deal exclusively with the Drod branch. I understand that our guild leader has a bit of a reputation, he suggested. The guild leaders conferred for a moment, then one by one reached out to shake his hand. We will let the others say their piece first, and then we can talk business. With that, the assembled spectators who hadn't returned to the auction cleared out, leaving only Carl and 5 mythic rank guild leaders. Why do I get the feeling that Drod is a bit under level?
Karl joked.
The big mage waved his hand dismissively. The Xylaz region of Sholaha is one of the highest power regions on the Dragon Isles, because there are nearly 24 totem and mythic ranked dungeons all in one area. Most of the Dragon Isles are similar to the rest of the island, with myths leading larger cities, though some have far more totems than can be called reasonable. Dragons are like that. Carl led them back to the sitting room where they had worked out the deal for the defeat, and took a seat on the same sofa again. Only 2 of the 5 guild leaders chose to sit on the provided seats. The others took their own from inventory instead. All right, let's get started. What sort of crafters do you have, and what do they specialize in? We know that you're supposed to be a totem-ranked runelord, but you said your whole guild branch focuses on crafting.
Karl nodded.
We have an overlord-ranked runic alchemist, an overlord-ranked demonic grandmaster smith, a master leatherworker and tailor, and assistants to them all, mostly at the commander and royal rank. A guild master with tattoos all down his arms smiled. So, you have the ability to provide a steady flow of commander rank healing and cleansing potions?
Karl nodded.
We sell them as regular stock at the store in Drod. The man looked startled. Really? Nobody keeps healing potions as regular stock. Getting enough ingredients is a nightmare, so most of us just keep a few as backups in case we get out of range of the healers. Carl tried not to laugh at the expression on the lone druid's face at that comment. Apparently, the myths weren't any better at staying in range of the healer than the overlords in Bara were. Possibly worse because they had more confidence in their powers, as they were among the peak powerhouses of the continent. So, that's what you want out of the alliance? A steady supply of weapons, armor, and potions for your juniors? Carl asked. Partially. We would also like to send some juniors as apprentices. Too many of the arts were lost or kept insular. You are the first runemaster that we have heard about outside the dwarves in centuries. Then, you have a runic alchemist, and that art was lost so long ago that I've never even heard of it. The big mage explained. Ah, so training and supply. That's a reasonable thing to want. One of the others cleared his throat. Don't forget about the higher rank items. What drops out of the totem rank dungeons is mostly crafting materials. It's a fey dungeon, and all the rewards are plant-based. So, those of us who don't use bows and staves are still a bit starved for weaponry. One of the warriors laughed. The mythic rank dungeon that our group controls drops 1 rare or epic grade mythic rank item every 4 runs on average. The rest is all considered trash loot, not better than a rare grade totem ranked item. Sure, it's great for filling out the juniors, but it would actually be better to have higher grade items at a lower rank for the diversity of buffs they would give. I don't know why the mythic dungeon is so cheap with its loot, but it's a cruel one. The druid nodded in agreement. It rewards based on some sort of internal calculation, and not directly from the killed mobs.
Karl seid.
I've seen ones like that before. They're a bit of a pain, especially when you realize there is a loot cap that doesn't care if you carried the group, fought evenly in a small group, or brought a whole 10-person team. I take it you've been to Bara, then? The druid asked.
Karl nodded.
I made a deal with the dwarves, and they gave me tax-free entrance. I really should go back again soon and clear it a few more times. Or at least send guild members. It's the primary source of crafting materials for the guild right now. Chapter 1062, Guild Stock. The druid smiled as he recalled that the item he had put up at the auction was made of elven steel, the primary export of the Bara dungeon. The fact that Karl had turned that into something that would touch off a guild war with a mythic raiding team was impressive enough that he wouldn't have any reservations about taking them as a full partner in the guild alliance. Normally, guilds would have to fight and prove that they were worthy of being full members, as that came with implied protection if one of the guilds was threatened or someone tried to take their resources. But the Darklight host appeared to be powerful enough that they could stand as a life skills guild equal to the top rating guilds. Can you provide a few samples of items that your guild can produce that aren't on the market? The druid asked, making sure that they hadn't overestimated based on Karl's combat ability. Karl smiled and began to take out random items. A totem-ranked blade he made the other day with flaming body on it. A set of decorative armor that Ray had made for Ophelia, but hadn't found time to give her yet. A few Overlord-ranked, full recovery potions from Remy that would heal, refresh stamina, and regenerate mana for the Imbiber. A prototype advancement potion now with a slower release rate and much lower potency, so it could be used as a supplement to aid growth, and not just to break bottlenecks. And finally, Karl took out an arcane element stone and carved the recall spell on it. Anyone could use the spell to return to their guild house, even without setting a location or having a marked stone with them. So it was useful all the time and to anyone. Plus, the spell was rare and powerful but easy to write. The guild masters stared at him as he worked, then the stone when he finished. Well, I have to say, this is all special order quality. Epic grade, totem-ranked berserker armor for a female berserker is quite a nice touch. But what is that strange overlord-ranked potion? The full recovery potion is a masterpiece, and I would like a few of those today, if possible. But that other one? The big mage asked. Oh, that's an experiment that our runic alchemist is running. She discovered a way to force advancement through the lower-ranked bottlenecks, and she's been adapting it to not risk the life of the imbiber. That one should be more like a health tonic. Drink it at lower ranks to advance quickly. Well, not too low of a rank. Royal or monarch ranked imbibers are best. I can ask her to make lower grade ones for the youngsters to grow more quickly, but that one would probably make them explode with an overload of mana their bodies couldn't process.
Karl explained.
The druid looked intensely curious. If you don't mind, can we sample it and see if it's a legitimate potion? Or another snake oil attempt to recreate a legendary potion? He asked.
Karl nodded.
Go ahead. Who do you plan to use it on? That was a good question. He hadn't thought about who to actually feed it to. The big mage opened a portal and brought through a beastkin girl in a maid outfit. Here's your big chance, Leah. You've been bloodline locked at Peak Royal for a while now, and this might help you break through to Monarch. He explained.
Karl chuckled.
That was exactly the same tactic that they had used in the past to get people to drink suspicious things that Remy made. The maid didn't even hesitate as he handed her the potion, and Remy came out of her space to watch while draped around Karl's neck. And who might this be? The druid asked. This is Remy. She is our runic alchemist, and that is her handiwork. She's also my bonded partner, a Naga queen that evolved and grew from a hatchling spirit snake at my side. The druid smiled. It's good to have friends. We should have brought our team's ranger to watch today, but he was out playing with his dog. The warrior beside him laughed. It's a Frost Mountain wolf and he's a beast ranger, but he treats that 500-kilo monster like a lap puppy. Remy giggled. It's nice to be appreciated. We have an impenetrable bulwark behemoth with us who absolutely adores having people brush his scales. As soon as the maid drank the potion, her power began to grow, and her body became a bit more youthful-looking, adapting to the longer lifespan of a monarch-ranked beastkin. It was a clear victory, but her power was still slowly growing. Not fast, but noticeable by the powerful guild masters in the room. "How long will that last?" the druid asked. Remy waved her serpentine head side to side as she calculated. "About an hour. There is an initial surge to help break the bottleneck without damage. Then I slowed down the rest so that it didn't overload the user. The first version released all that energy at once, and it was somewhat less than optimal." Dana was still mad at her. What would happen if she immediately drank another after this one was done? Could she reach Overlord in a day? The big mage asked. Remy bobbed her head. Probably. But she would never advance even a little bit again, and she would most likely die in a few months. The plants that go into that potion are a sort of toxin that most cleansing spells don't touch, and the fast advancement makes the cells of the body unstable. If she drank another one next year, it shouldn't be any more harmful than this one, but I don't know how much closer together would be safe. The mage smiled. Such a moral and considerate researcher. If Dana could hear him, he would likely strangle him. Or Remy. The only reason Remy knew the answer was because she had done the math after she had used the first one on Dana and watched her body recover. Advancing Dana to totem as soon as Remy was able had definitely been an early option, before she discovered the side effects. Chapter 1063. That potion. The big mage ran his fingers through his hair. That potion changed things. It could bypass bloodline limitations and move people a rank over their limits. For those like him who had dragon blood, it wasn't much of an issue. But for the beastkin, the elves, the fey species, and those with monster blood, it was practically a divine gift. They had never even dared to hope that they could make it past their bloodline limits. The elves and fey could theoretically reach immortality. But something about their compatibility with the system left them stuck at random spots. Nobody understood why, but the older dragons said it was just part of the system awakening, and if they waited a few hundred more years, the problem would go away. However, if you were stuck at commander or royal rank in a city full of overlords and totems, those would be 200 really lousy years. Like Drod, Xylaz, and most of the other major cities of the Dragon Isles set social status by power level. In Xylaz, the standard was royal, not ascended, to be considered worthy of basic dignity in the workplace as an adult. Like the beastkin maid who had just made it to monarch rank. The guild masters silently conferred about the terms of the deal that they wanted to offer. Clearly Carl and his team could offer far more than expected, not just a steady supply of gear and basic potions, which would have already been enough to make them an invaluable asset to a large alliance. You know, this sort of thing really does make it difficult to work out equitable terms. The druid muttered. Carl laughed. You have no idea. Keeping the Darklight host guild members happy is a never-ending battle. Half the time we just go for keeping the green dragon cleric happy, which entertains everyone else. But advancement opportunities, especially ones that please the dragon gods, are always near the top of our list. My class grows in power far faster than it logically has any right to, and everyone else that I came up with is struggling to keep up. Most are monarchs now, but we will have them advance to Overlord as soon as someone verifies that the new potion is safe enough. The druid snorted in amusement. So, when you said that the potion was experimental, you meant that it worked in theory, not that you'd actually begun trials.
Karl shrugged.
This is version 2. The first one definitely worked, but nearly killed the imbiber, even with totem-ranked healers present. This one is much safer, but we didn't know if it would be effective enough. The real danger is that using it might damage their future potential. Getting them to Overlord now so they're only one rank behind me is a good start. But if it hinders their ability to make it to the totem rank, what are they supposed to do when I reach Mythic? I have already confirmed that my progression should be smooth and without a bottleneck. So, if I don't do something, I will end up leaving them behind. The druid smiled softly as the others argued about the terms of the deal. That is somewhat inevitable, I fear. You're already a dominant force among totems, and even if they make Overlord today, there is little to no chance that they will manage to match up well enough to keep joining you in the near future. However, with a guild alliance, you will gain access to over 200 more overlords between our guilds. That's more than enough to keep everyone occupied. What classes are the rest of your group? We might be able to fit them into an existing raid group, as we have a number that are recently advanced. He offered. That's the fun part. There are 3 dragon priestesses. Of the red, green, and black, though they all hold advanced classes now. Then an Ursine Avenger, the rare grade version of a Titanic Bear Totem Berserker. And a Mystic Blade Master, who has a particular skill with golems, thanks to her class.
Karl explained.
So, it's just you and the Berserker, surrounded by beautiful clerics and a divine fox beastkin lady mage? I can see how that might have drawn enough envy to start a fight. The big mage laughed, beginning to understand the backstory to the day's events. It was only the mage and myself at the auction. The others are resting and waiting for me to finish my journey to the Naga temple, so that we can let the Naga queen here visit the shaman god shrine. If he had known that we were blessed with so many enviable members, he might have demanded more. Also, the Berserker is a female werbear. Well, possibly a human with the transformation ability from her class, but I rarely see her outside werbear form.
Karl explained.
The druid whistled in appreciation, and Remy giggled. Why is everyone so obsessed with the werbear? Not that it's not funny to see her get hit on everywhere she goes. But she's more into dainty nature priestesses than large men who are into werbears. Remy asked. The druid shrugged. I don't know. I was more impressed that Karl managed to land a group like that. The obsession with big-muscled women isn't for me. Oh, I've got a picture. He took out a picture of a middle-aged badger-type beastkin woman, heavyset and surrounded by children. You've got a lovely family. My sister Kara says you have good taste. Remy informed him. You have a sister with you? The druid asked, confused. Kara came out to stand by Karl, startling the group, and Remy darted her head in Kara's direction as a way of pointing in snake form. That is my sister Kara, the Chaos Badger. The druid was fully belly laughing now, distracting the others, who had only noticed that something was going on when Kara appeared. But when they saw that Karl's group had a badger, it didn't take them long to put things together and realize that it was something to do with the guild master's family. Chaos Badger is redundant, isn't it? All badgers are chaos, especially as children. He chortled happily. This one is extra crispy spicy chaos. Not only can she fly, but she can see the future sometimes. The druid smiled and nodded. That's a good friend to have. We will have to talk more about your group later. I should join these guys to discuss the terms of the alliance offer. Chapter 1064. Nara Group Guild Alliance. It only took them a few more minutes before they had a full offer ready to be presented. It was drafted by someone in their guild, and the Beastkin maid presented it to Karl with a reverent look that said she would not hold it against them for using her as a test subject. Karl unrolled it, as they had written the offer in the form of a scroll, and looked through the terms. Nara Group Guild Alliance Offer. The Nara Group invites the Darklight host to join as full members of their guild alliance. Included as basic terms of the alliance are protection services should the Darklight host or its members be challenged or attacked by guilds outside the alliance. 30% off wholesale price for raw materials from the allied guild warehouses. Open access to the Guild Alliance Dungeon Team Organization Board. As additional terms to the alliance, the Nara Group requires open access to new items created exclusively by the Darklight host. Purchase order priority for epic grade and higher crafted items before they are placed on the open market or at the guild store. Wholesale pricing on epic grade and higher items crafted by the Darklight host. The Nara Group additionally offers open access to totem rank and higher item drop bidding. Once weekly escorts through totem rank and higher dungeons for Darklight host members of suitable ability. Free of charge. Karl read through the scroll and had a few questions. How does the bidding for totem rank items usually work in the alliance? Hugo, the oversized mage, smiled proudly as he answered. Normally, the only ones with the right to bid are those in the group, and if they don't need it, the next offer goes to those at or above the level of the item with an associated class. It's our way of making sure that items make it to the ones who need them first. Also, the bidding is not done with money or items of value. We only trade opportunities. A priority spot on a dungeon team, our bidding spot on another item, and so on. For you, I suppose that it would be fine to trade favors, as you are the only totem-ranked crafter in the guild at the moment.
Karl smilet.
Being able to trade things he could make for things he wanted would make his life much easier. Steve the druid nodded in agreement. It's how we maintain our power. Most guilds hoard items or let members do so. If we're not actually going to use the item, it goes to bid. Thanks to that, we're one of the best geared alliances around the eastern shores of Lake Naraletum. Can I have a moment to confer with my guild members? I don't see this being an issue, but they might see something that I don't. Carl asked. Of course. Carl passed the scroll through a small opening into the tiny world so that everyone could read it on their own. Your control of transport magic is impressive. What is your portal range? Hugo asked.
Karl shrugged.
Intercontinental if I keep the portal small. I'm not particularly well-traveled, but I have no problem reaching back to the Kaptumia continent, where I was born. The myths all paused to stare at him. That is absolutely broken for a totem. Not just that, but it would make the exile process completely redundant. We've recruited a few overlords into the guild alliance who arrived close to the bottleneck, and if it was so easy to just go back when they reached totem rank, most would have. Fortunately for their home nations, none of them were mages to guide the spell with a group of totems backing them.
Karl chuckled.
Every so often, I send care packages home of items suitable for my friends at home. What nation are you from? Steve asked. The Golden Dragon. The druid nodded. That explains your fondness for priestesses. When you start out not expecting to make it above commander rank in your life, a friend who can create food is an important traveling partner. Carl agreed. Steve snorted in amusement. That's a concern at every level. Hell, if it wasn't for the dragon clerics, half of the guilds would starve. The area around Lake Naraletum is an unofficial war zone. There are constant monster spawns, over a dozen high-ranked dungeons just within walking distance of the city, and the highest concentration of psychopaths and narcissistic losers on the continent. But the opportunities are so good that we still stay. The terms look good for us. Even Ray is happy with them. Dana informed Carl so he could take the scroll back. Carl took the scroll back from the tiny world and signed it, then shook hands with the guild leaders when the system notice appeared in all their interfaces. System notice, the Darklight host has joined the Nara Group Guild Alliance. Carl saw a whole new category of system functions appear for him, including the Alliance storage area, the dungeon team signups, a bulletin board, and a separate Alliance leader chat. Moments later, the Darklight host section of the board began to auto-populate, based on what was in their guild store inventory. Carl also noticed that he could access the guild store inventory again. The guild houses of the Alliance members served as a bridge of sorts, shortening the distance between him and the bank location. Or perhaps it extended the distance you could access the store from. Either way, it worked, and now Remy could start loading in all the stuff she had been stockpiling. As could Ray, though she just put a bunch of stuff into the guild house storage with labels for various members. There was immediate celebration in the Guild Alliance chat channel, and the Darklight host's guild bank balance was increasing at an insane rate. Not even the commander rank healing potions were safe. You guys really were short on crafters, weren't you? They've bought over 1,000 healing potions in the last minute, and the store put a 10 per customer limit on them.
Karl laughed.
The guild leaders shrugged. Not everything is done in a group, and if you don't walk around with a cleric beside you all the time, it's good to have potions on hand. Chapter 1065. Out of stock. Not only did they sell a massive number of potions, they were also cleared out of accessories. Weapons were much more common drops, but specific accessories were almost impossible to get from a dungeon, where the stats on the very few that dropped were random, and rarely perfectly matched to any class and specialty. So, even if they were commander and royal rank, the ones that were sold by the Darklight host were still an upgrade for basically all the Alliance members overlord rank and under. For the stronger members, even one stat in their category was enough to make it better than anything at the royal rank. However, the guild leaders had hopes that Carl would soon put a few items at higher ranks up for sale. Ashbringer's overlord ranked weapons had sold very well, though they weren't all gone yet. But when Carl put up a dozen overlord ranked rings for warriors, they were gone faster than anyone could feasibly have read the full description. I think that I have some work to do once we get to the temple.
Karl Laukit.
How many overlords and totems are there in the alliance? Remy asked, planning her potion production. There are a combined 64 totems and nearly 200 overlords between the 5 guilds. We're all membership capped at 199 regular members each. So, nearly 1,000 members in total. One of the other guild leaders snapped his fingers and pointed at Remy. Brilliant! I just realized that your branch house only has like 20 people. With a totem-ranked leader, you should be able to have 100. So, we could transfer all the hopeful crafters in the alliance to the Darklight host as members. He explained.
Karl frownet.
We are somewhat particular, not just about skills but personality. The guild treats each other as family. The guild master shrugged. That's fine. We've got 5,000 people on the waiting list to enter one of the alliance guilds. I'm sure that you can find enough junior craftsmen or aspiring apprentices to do a full round of interviews. Karl nodded in understanding. I will talk to the group leaders about bringing in more people. We've still got work to do with some of our other crafters to get them up to our exacting standards. But after that, we can take in a new batch of children to train. Is it that hard to learn trade skills, that you have to start as children? Dave asked. Karl shook his head. No, I could teach you a trade skill now if you don't have one. But how much actual crafting would you get done? The druid nodded in understanding. Good point. My whole life would turn to chaos if I was suddenly being asked to make mythic rank crafted items at every hour of the day. I have far too many responsibilities for that, and frankly, I wouldn't want to. But on a related note, you're going to get plenty of requests for accessories.
Karl nodded.
I have a load of overlord-ranked raw materials on hand. I just haven't been focusing on making extra items, just custom orders. We have an agreement not to sell higher-ranked items from the guild store in Drod without a custom order. In the past, I put a bunch of them on the shelves, and it caused some issues with exporters. Karl looked through the list of alliance members from totem rank and higher. Over half of them were warriors, and the majority of the others were mage and shaman-type spellcasters. They didn't have many clerics at all, and most of the shamans and druids were tagged as healers in the member notes. Karl noted that someone had tagged him as runemaster and crafting team organizer already, which seemed a bit ironic given how he had ended up in the alliance. They hadn't even known the extent of the Darklight host's crafting skills until after the negotiations started. You said that you were going to take this lovely young lady to the Naga temple, right? Why don't I open a portal for you, and we can continue this chat there? The Naga will be going crazy over a new queen for at least a day or two, Hugo suggested. Remy was confused. Are there that few Naga queens? Hugo chuckled. There are under 20 of them, in total, on all 4 islands combined. Dave nodded in agreement. There is roughly a 5% chance that a Naga princess will become a true Naga queen. Most tribes are led by princesses. Some are even led by shamans because they have no royal lineage left. That sounds like they're going to be annoying, Remy muttered. But she still wanted to see the temple. Please open the portal. I have a whole group of Naga waiting to show her the temple, and we've made them wait a whole day already, Karl suggested. Hugo opened the portal to a small rocky hill overlooking a massive temple complex, the size of a village. Welcome, Queen Remy, to the Naga temples. Now, where are the Naga who wanted to escort you? Did they say what entrance they would be at? Remy laughed. We have them in a separate space. Karl opened the tiny world, and the whole group exited, with the excited Naga leading the way. You weren't joking, your group really is the envy of most guilds. Dave joked. Isn't that a behemoth? One of the other leaders, a warrior named Raj, asked. Thor nodded. I sink in the swamp if I don't transform. It's a really useful skill. The guild leaders didn't miss that he lifted Tessa by the waist to lift her over swampy puddles. But they refrained from joking about the behemoth's obvious crush on the priestess. She clearly didn't object. The Naga search party leader eagerly shook Karl's hand with both of his own. Thank you so much for bringing us right to the temple. I will arrange somewhere for you to rest while we give Queen Remy the tour. Some areas are off-limits to all but the Naga, and those are the ones where it is most important that the Queen visits. He insisted. All right, I have no problem with that. Remy, have fun. We will see you tonight. Remy nodded, then transformed back and realized that she was still draped over Carl. But she had transformed too early. It was muddy out here, and who knew what was in that mud? Oh well, eternal lightning would keep it off her scales. Chapter 1066. Naga Temple. The procession attracted huge amounts of attention from the temple guards as they approached with multiple totems and 5 mythic guild leaders in their number. That was not the normal process, as each should be welcomed individually if they were going to visit the temple. But when they noticed that there was a Naga queen leading the procession with one of their own at her side, the temple guard nearly forgot that they had duties other than as greeters. They all prostrated as she approached, and Carl felt Remy's happiness at the chance to have random people worship her just for showing up. Don't get used to it, Carl reminded her. Just for a little bit. I mean, how often do I get to meet so many new Naga? Once Remy passed, the temple guard turned to the rest of the group and bowed politely, though not nearly as low. Welcome, honored guests. What brings you here today? The guard captain asked. We are the guild members and escorts accompanying Queen Remy. If you could find us a place to wait while she finishes her visit to the temple, it would be appreciated.
Carl explained.
The guard looked briefly confused, but nodded. Of course. We will arrange that now. These Naga are acting particularly sketchy. If anything seems off, return straight to your space. Don't wait to find out how bad things can get.
Carl informed Remy.
Yeah, now that we're away from the group, all the worship is getting super creepy. People keep trying to touch me. Carl tried not to laugh at the mental image of bowing Naga reaching out to touch her scales as she slithered by. The temple guard led them all to an empty dormitory full of small rooms around a large common area, similar to the ones at the Seminary Academy or the Capital Cathedral. Rooms intended for simply sleeping while everything else was done elsewhere. But it had comfortable seating in the main room and a pair of Naga in servants' uniforms waiting in the kitchen. Hugo settled onto a recliner that groaned under his massive bulk and turned his attention to Carl. Now, I don't suppose that you could make a few custom items while we wait? Carl shrugged. I don't see why not. I have the materials. What did you need? The mage smiled. I don't suppose that you can buff spell power directly with your skill. Can you? Dana snorted in amusement. The man had set his expectations far too low. I think that I can come up with something suitable for a mage. I've got an elven steel bracelet here that will do the job. Carl mentally worked out the best way to put spell damage, skill activation speed, and mana cost reduction on the item, then quickly carved them and empowered the runes. The guild leaders watched with rapt attention as the runes flashed through the colors, then settled on inky black at totem rank. It wasn't epic grade, just rare due to the limited runes on it. But the combination was perfect for a mage. How is that? Better than what you have? Or should I try with something a bit more precious? Carl asked. It wasn't like they could possibly know that the outcome was based entirely on his efforts, not the actual materials. Hugo turned the item over in his hands reverently as the others examined its system information. That is beautiful. Exactly what I was hoping for and more. Even though it's totem ranked and rare grade, it's still worlds better than the one that I have been using. Hugo agreed. Then he took out a number of mythic ranked gems and metal bars. Suitable payment? He asked. Perfect choice. Carl agreed. Dave cleared his throat, but Raj stepped in front of him with a challenging look.
Carl laughed.
Don't worry. I have more bracelets to work with. I can make one for everyone easily enough. Just tell me what you want. Strength, speed, skill power. Raj insisted. What Hugo got looks good. Dave replied, still giving the item envious looks. The other pair of warriors gestured at Raj. What he said. Warriors are simple creatures, and we're all the main tanks for our guild raid teams. So Carl got to work, first making a duplicate bracelet for Dave, and then starting on the warrior class specials. There was limited room for runes, and he couldn't go overkill with elven steel as it was an overlord ranked material, and he was already overloading it a little making totem ranked rare items. They had more material at the totem rank, but there hadn't been any reason for anyone to use it with Carl gone. So, there were no pre-made items available. Draconic strength, improved agility, skill damage, and damage reduction all complemented each other with a bit of dwarven poetry on Carl's part. Each of them might not be as high as only adding 2 or 3 buffs to the item, but as Carl added the mana, the bracelets were stable. The effort of making 3 at a time left Carl panting, and gave the others the impression that was his daily limit. But the success was undeniable, and the 3 warriors cheered as they looked at the identical items. Even the percentage bonuses and flat damage reduction of 350 points were the same on them all. That wasn't a lot of damage reduction, especially for mythic-ranked warriors, but it was not a primary bonus for the items. The greatest of the bonuses was the extra strength, followed by the skill damage, which best matched with draconic strength. Well, gentlemen, is that what you needed? If not, I can try to make something different tomorrow, Carl offered. The 3 warriors shook their heads. No, this is perfect. It's got everything that we wanted, plus a bit of damage reduction. Flat damage reduction isn't worth nearly as much at mythic rank, but it's enough to nullify the damage from weaker creatures. Perfect. Now, did you want to stay here the night? Or are you heading home? I suspect that Remy will be a while, Carl asked. We will wait. Something is off about these Naga, and I suspect that if we leave, they will start to cause you trouble. Our alliance agreement did say we'd help, so call this a preventative intervention. Hugo insisted. Chapter 1067. Remy's Temple Tour. The pair of Naga servants looked vaguely nervous at his comment, but confused, as they hadn't actually been informed of why this group was at the temple. As the lowest ranked of Naga workers, they didn't even qualify to be told. After all, 100 more like them could easily be hatched if something happened. They've shown me the various historical sites, and now we're going into the temple area for the Naga shaman goddess. Oh, there is a shrine to my lucky statue lady here too. Goddess shaman Naga looks grumpy. I wonder who carved her. We need to have a talk. Elemental spells are fun. She should be a smiling goddess. Oh, there's a big ceremony thing. Cleanse myself first? I can do that. Remy's narration made Thor and Kara laugh, especially when they realized that Remy had downed a long-acting purification potion before washing herself so that she wouldn't be affected by negative spells for at least the next hour, unless they were stronger than her potion. As Remy started her ceremony to be properly introduced to the Naga gods, a group of senior Naga shamans came in to greet Carl's group. Thank you all for bringing the young queen here. It is so rare that we get to meet a new member of an ancient royal family. Their leader announced, speaking common with a heavy accent. You can continue in Serpent if you prefer. The system translates it without any issue, Carl suggested. The aging Naga laughed and made a gesture towards himself. Unfortunately, I do not have a system interface, he explained in Serpent.
Carl shrugged.
That's fine, I can understand you anyhow. The guild leaders and the other members of his group all nodded. They had no problem understanding the shaman. In that case, this becomes much less stressful for me. Can any of you tell me of the origin of Queen Remy? Her clan isn't listed in any of our records, and when we did a divining, something went wrong, and it said that her mother was born hundreds of thousands of years ago, but her egg only hatched a few years ago, likely less than 3.
Carl nodded.
Her egg was recovered from a dungeon, and she was born as a Naga spirit snake. She then evolved to princess, and later queen as she gained power. The shaman was visibly shaking with excitement before he sat down, collapsing onto his coiled body, and the servants brought him a cup of tea. So, she is from an original pure Naga bloodline. That explains so much. But you are certain that her egg was from the dungeon? Not a monster spawn anomaly? He asked after a few moments to calm himself.
Carl nodded.
It was definitely a dungeon. The other shamans made notes and discussed the possibilities as the servants brought around food for the group. That is wonderful. The dungeons were formed ages ago, so Queen Remy won't have been affected at all by the generational changes and selective breeding over the many centuries. One of the shamans declared. I take it that is important to you? Carl asked. The shamans all nodded eagerly. It has become nearly impossible for most royal families to even reproduce enough royals to keep their population up, much less expand to fill in the gaps in the depleted tribes. An original queen should be able to hatch an entire clutch of princesses at will. The shamans saw the confusion on the faces of most of the group and decided to elaborate. The majority of Naga evolution determinations are decided before hatching by the queen or Naga mother that birthed them. Only they can't choose a rank above their own. So warrior and servant mothers can't make royal guards, shamans, or royals. Carl shook his head in dismay. If you're hoping that Remy will have a clutch for you, you are likely to be disappointed. She's still quite young, and it will take quite the Naga warrior to impress her. Well, unless you've got a Naga king like her father. The Naga looked startled. They didn't recall kings being a part of Naga culture at all. Male shamans, sure, but they weren't royals. Can you describe this Naga king? The elder shaman asked. Sure. He had some elemental abilities, water-based. He was 3 times the size of a full-grown shaman queen and massively physically strong. He was the boss of the dungeon where we found Remy's egg. There is no question about the status, as the dungeons are excellent about naming their occupants.
Karl explained.
2 of the shamans raced out of the room, which alarmed the myths. But the elder shaman held up his hands in a placating gesture. They've just gone to the library to look for historical references to a king among Naga. Our society is matriarchal, a male royal is something new to us. Lotus tapped the table to get their attention. Maybe that's why you're having problems keeping up the royal lines? Nobody made any male royals, so there are no men strong enough to be worthy of a proper queen? Like with dire bears. If the male is too weak, the female simply kills him for insulting her with his advances. He wouldn't be able to make strong enough children. But a grizzled old former alpha bear, well, past his prime and barely mobile, doesn't get the same treatment from the females, even though he would struggle against the weaker males in a fight. The shamans considered her proposal. A servant of the green dragon understood animal nature very well, so they couldn't just discount that the genetic imperative might apply in their case as well. But if that was true, it could derail their plans. How could they convince a true queen to help them with their lineage issues when they didn't have a male present that she would deem worthy? And what would happen if someone tried to force the issue? Queen Remy was only an overlord, but she had powerful friends. Chapter 1068. Naga King? The first of the shaman elders returned within a minute, pointing excitedly at a picture in a book that appeared to be an ancient book of Naga fairy tales. I found it. There was a Naga King. The Naga King. He was a legendary rank hero from another world who saved the Naga race from the aggression of the lizardfolk warlord Schitzel. Then he simply vanished. I know it's just a story, but it might be based on reality. If there were a pure royal lineage with both male and female royals, then we really might have lost something important. He blurted out before his body had even stopped swaying from the sudden stop. Lotus nodded in satisfaction. She knew that her knowledge would be correct, even if she didn't know the Naga that well. Remy, how are things going? Carl asked. They're doing some sort of ceremony to wake the shaman goddess so that I can be instated as a full queen of the Naga. Remy replied, distractedly. Lotus pulled the edge of the book down so she could see it, then stole the ancient tome from the shaman and turned it to face the group. Look, it's that guy. She was right. That image was definitely of the Naga King in the dungeon. Every detail was exact, so whoever had drawn it had seen him. I believe that the story was not quite what you expected. That drawing is exactly the same as the Naga King in the dungeon, right down to the markings on his head. So, I think that whoever wrote it had been there, and had made up the story afterward to explain what they had seen. So it's real. It's really real, and verified that a Naga King once existed. The elder shaman breathed quietly. He was lost in thought, but the other shamans waited for him, as they all had much to process before they said or did anything else. Oddly, it was one of the servants who connected the dots first out of anyone. Master Solomon? If the young queen was placed in a dungeon by the gods, what will happen when the welcoming ceremony ends? She whispered, but not quietly enough for Carl and the majority of the group to miss it. The shamans were immediately alarmed. How were they supposed to know that? What if the goddess was upset that someone had brought her out? Worse, what if she sided with Queen Remy and turned on the temple residents? There was an ancient school of thought that the dungeons were actually a preservation method, to remind people what the original members of the various cultures lived and looked like. Had the other shamans already informed her of the breeding program? Or had they wanted to wait until after she was initiated and the goddess influence was stronger? The shaman goddess is really friendly. She says that there is a reverse scale to the apocalypse spell, and Brother Hawk is going to hate it. Remy cheered. So, their ritual worked? Carl asked, while watching the shamans silently conferring about the servant's speculation. Yep, it worked well. It's not done yet, though. She says I'm going to get a present. The shaman elders were looking nervous, and the guild leaders all gave Carl matching this is about to get sketchy sorts of looks. But before anyone said anything, a surge of divine power from the far side of the complex slammed into them. The Naga prostrated themselves, and everyone under totem rank was forced to their knees, while Carl resisted the urge, but bowed under the pressure. The mythic guild members were showing the strain as well, but they were all seated, so their positions didn't change much. Then, the power was gone, and the distinct feeling of an advancement filled Remy's space. Sudden shouts of panic filled the temple complex, and then alarms began to blare while someone began to ring a gong, causing chaos in the room. What is happening? Dev demanded as he leapt to his feet with sword and shield in his hand. The elder shaman flailed his hands wildly. Please calm down. I don't know what happened yet. That is the emergency alarm, but they are ringing the gongs for intruders on the loose inside the city, instead of the bell for invasion. Our temple guards will protect this area. Please rest assured that you are in no immediate danger. In her space, Remy downed one of her own diluted advancement potions in an attempt to stabilize her advancement and get a bit of extra power boost, then watched the situation from Carl's point of view. It was only getting more intense outside, and then an explosion in one of the temples alerted Carl to the fact that this might not just be about Remy vanishing from the temple. That had been his first assumption, and the reaction of the Naga would have been somewhat justified. But it appeared that they really were having issues. The sound of explosions became the sound of combat in the streets, and then guards were surrounding the building. They barricaded the doors, locking the elder shamans inside with Carl and his group. Dev gave Carl a confused shrug. Well, it looks like we're not the threat they were so worried about. The elder shaman turned to him. What do you mean? You've all been acting off all day, and we thought that you might be trying to abduct one of our allied guild members. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The druid explained. The Naga looked embarrassed. Well, I admit we intended to ask her to stay with us, but there was no violence in the plan. Do you have contact with her? Is the young queen all right? Is she in danger? Carl smiled and shook his head. When she advanced, she went home to consolidate her gains. She's not in any danger. One of the shaman elders sighed, while the servants quietly laughed. The elders had been talking all day about how they had such big plans to recruit the queen to stay at the temple, and she just went home when she got what she wanted. So fast that nobody could even try to stop her. It was very much regal behavior. The opinions of lesser Naga were irrelevant when they contradicted her will. Of course, they didn't know that Carl meant a separate mental space right here. The assumption that everyone else, including the guild leaders, had made was that she had returned to Drod. After an advancement, it could take days before your power was stable enough to be fully active, and most people preferred to sleep off the change in their own bed if possible. Which was exactly what Remy planned to do. But on her altar, with the new statue of the Naga shaman goddess she had obtained to accompany the old lucky statue she had. Chapter 1069. A True Queen. The shaman elders quickly came to the same realization that the servants had. Remy was a true Naga queen, and she had dismissed their opinions as less important than the stabilization of her advancement. The best that they could hope for now was to convince her people to bring her back for a visit, where they could try to recruit her again, or at least convince her to stay for one clutch so that they could spread royals to some of the declining tribes. Without intervention, they would surely fail. But there weren't many options when most of the royal lines could hardly produce a successor at all. So, They tried to convey the urgency of the situation to Carl, who appeared to be her closest ally. Totem Carl, please relay an urgent request from us to Queen Remy. I know this might be very forward, but it is imperative to the survival of many of the tribes that they find a new royal lineage to continue. He paused as if unsure how to phrase the next part. We would like to ask Queen Remy to part with a clutch of royal eggs, so that they might repopulate the royal families of our declining tribes. In her space, Remy snorted in amusement. They thought that they could just pass her eggs around like party favors? That was not how it worked at all. A queen could only be born in circumstances that were worthy of them. If the tribe was disloyal and had forgotten the old ways, they would never have a queen. The goddess had said so. If they weren't so stuck on their delusions that the shaman elders could guide Naga society, they would realize that it was their divine mistress, serpent lady of the swamps and seas, that was the true deciding factor behind Naga society's future. Carl caught most of her thoughts, though she was too drowsy to relay them clearly. I have relayed the message, and Queen Remy has a response of sorts. She says that it might be possible in the future, but no queen can be born to a weak tribe, or one that puts others above the will of the divine mistress of the swamps and seas.
Carl relayed.
The shaman elders all froze in shock. That name, how do you know it? Carl blinked slowly, wondering if the day's events had shocked them too much. There was, after all, a massive battle raging through their temple complex, and they were more concerned about getting royal eggs. Before Carl could answer, Lotus snapped her fingers and gestured wildly as she came to some realization. I get it now. That's why this place feels funny. It's a zoo. A Naga zoo, where the young are raised in captivity and domesticated. The shamans looked somewhere between horrified and offended. We are not zookeepers. We are raising the future royals to know their duties to the people and Naga society. One of them retorted. Lotus shook her head. No, I am right. They're being taught to follow orders and submit. That's not right. It goes against the divine magic of this place. The elders were about to explode with rage, but the senior among them raised his hand in a cautioning gesture. The Green Dragon's priestess speaks her truth. Indeed, the Naga have become civilized with the times. No longer are we feral tribes building shrines in the swamps and seas. We travel, we trade, and most importantly, we have forgotten that the shaman elders are not leaders of the Naga. We are servants of our goddess. First, foremost, and only. Lotus nodded happily. That was the right answer, even if he didn't believe it or intend to give up his power. Carl patted Lotus on the shoulder. Queen Remy agrees. The tribes no longer follow the ways of their goddess, so they are losing her blessings. Even with the system active again, if their patron doesn't favor them, then the royals will continue to fail to become queens. A glimmer of soul energy caught Carl's attention, and he motioned for Ray to grab whatever was hiding in the corner. It turned out to be a tiny spirit snake, a hatchling that had hidden from the battle in a corner of the roof, then made its way inside. Carl took the startled snake from Ray and gently stroked its head as he considered the next step. Can you tell me who is attacking your temples? Could be important. He asked the elders. The shaman elder looked embarrassed. It appears to be one of the Naga tribes that was visiting. I don't have a reason for the attack yet, but they appear to be targeting one of the dormitories and a secondary temple. A particularly traditional tribe? Carl asked, leading the shaman elders to the desired answer. The elder nodded. As you say, they were resistant to the idea of having their young shamans trained at the temple. The council determined that they had strayed from the goddess teachings, so their next generation of leaders was brought here for proper education. Dev sighed and shook his head. You realize how that sounds from our side, right? It sounds a lot like you abducted the heirs to their tribes to indoctrinate them into your version of the Naga traditions. The shaman elder shook his head. It's not like that. Their tribe was falling into savagery. If we didn't act, they would have been wiped out by their neighbors. The mythic-ranked druid shrugged. Sounds like they don't agree. But as the matter doesn't concern us, we won't get involved in Naga politics. The tiny snake in Carl's hands bobbed its head in agreement. Well spoken, druid. The goddess approves of your stance. Carl considered setting the spirit snake down so that she could properly address the crowd, but she seemed to have a high level of affinity for head pats, and actively rubbed against his hand when he stopped. For a moment the shamans were confused. Then one of them realized what had happened. "Princess, call off your tribe. Violence against the temples is not the way of the goddess." Chapter 1070 is all about the attitude. The tiny spirit snake laughed, shaking in Carl's hand with amusement at the shaman elder's assertion. "Why don't you ask the goddess to expel us from her temple? Surely, if your ways are the right way, she will protect her loyal shamans." The little princess asked. The shaman elder visibly calculated the chances that Carl would not interfere if he attacked the little snake. It was only commander rank, a tiny obnoxious little royal that he could squish with a single strike. But the battle was getting more intense in the compound, and the fighting was getting closer to where they were now. One of the other elders pushed forward to address Carl directly. "Can we count on you to do the right thing, if there is no peaceful resolution?" he asked, but his tone made it more of a demand that expected to be obeyed. "Let me confer with the goddess,"
Carl replied.
The elders looked confused as Carl borrowed the new goddess statue from Remy's space for a moment and placed it in his other hand, while still holding the spirit snake up. "What do you think?" he asked the statue, with a small pulse of mana into the carving of an offering in its hands. The image of a six-armed Naga shaman goddess appeared in front of him, then dissipated into a blue water magic barrier over the tiny snake. "I think that's our answer," Carl replied with a shrug, then gave Remy back her statue so she could finish stabilizing her power. The shamans stared in shock at Carl, and even the tiny spirit snake was frozen in confusion. "Did you just get a direct answer from the goddess to your question?" the little princess asked quietly. "Of course, that's kind of how holy relics work. As long as you ask them the right question and offer them some mana in good faith, they'll give some sign as to their opinion. Though I would note that no answer is an answer of its own."
Carl explained.
The spirit snake tilted her head in confusion. "How is that? Haven't you ever met someone who asked questions that weren't worth a response? Not even a flicker of recognition?" Carl asked. Dave and Lotus began to laugh, while Tessa and Ophelia shared a knowing look. Lotus was 100% guilty of being that person on many occasions. But it made her happy to ask, even if she'd already made up her mind to do the thing anyhow. The young spirit snake was looking at Carl as if he knew the wisdom of the universe, and even the shaman elders had to smile. It was a bit more complex than that, but surely the young one would remember this day for the rest of their life. As short as it might be, they were about to take action when the doors swung open and the temple guards slithered in, followed by two younger shamans and a Naga princess who looked a lot like Remy had before her coloration had changed at overlord rank. Carl's first thought was that this meant the battle was over, and the insurrection had been handled, but the look on the faces of the elders said that was not the case.
Mom.
"I made a new friend. He's friends with Queen Remy, and the goddess answers his questions." The spirit snake greeted their new guest. "That's nice, darling," the newly arrived princess replied, clearly confused by the situation. Then she turned to the elder shamans. "Greetings, honored elders. I believe you will find that there have been some changes made around the temple today. The goddess is most pleased with the change of management, but it does come with some restructuring. Your managerial roles will no longer be needed. However, we will be blessed to keep you on as advisors to assist the future of the Naga with your decades of wisdom. Guards, kindly escort the advisors back to their rooms. I believe that they require a good night's rest. Tomorrow will be a long day for everyone." The shaman elders were shocked when their own guards turned on them, politely but firmly leading them out of the building, where Carl could still hear some lingering battles. Then another group of Naga royals entered, before looking around the room in confusion. "Should there not be one more queen here?" one of them asked. The little spirit snake popped her head up to get noticed. "Queen Remy is sleeping off her totem rank advancement," she replied helpfully. The totem-ranked princess nodded. "That is understandable. I take it that you are all friends of the young queen? It appears that she's in good hands, with those who respect the will of the gods. If you would like to remain here, we will ensure your safety during the transition of the temple. Hugo shook his head. I think that we've done what we came here for, and I really don't feel like getting caught in the middle of a political transition. So, if Carl will turn over the young snake, I will open a portal to our guild house in Xylaz, and we can continue our introductions to the rest of the ranking members of the guild alliance. The spirit snake was startled. She had forgotten that Carl's hand was more than a warm and soft place to rest, and that it would inevitably leave with him. She quickly slid down his arm and across the floor to climb up her mother, another safe perch where she could still see what was going on, and relay the heroic tale of her spy activities, while omitting the part where she was instantly caught by Carl's friend. Good luck with your work here. We can catch up in the future if I happen to cross your territory, or see you again when Remy returns to confer with the goddess. Carl informed the Naga royals. Perhaps we will see you again. Once you have met once, it seems much more likely that fate will pull you together again in the future. The spirit snake's mother agreed. Then Hugo opened a large portal so he didn't have to duck to walk through, and led the way out of the Naga temple.